scriptures for this morning will be taken from the book of Matthew, chapter 8, verses 23 to 27. Jesus calms the storm. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. The Jesus was speaking. The disciples went in the boat, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You have little faith. Why are you so afraid?" And he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him."
Yeah. And I've got mine. This is right, but I don't know what is happening here. Because I've got my slides right here on my laptop. And I don't know what's going on with what's behind me. That's my home screen, what you see up there. I don't know why these are not.
Try restarting the PowerPoint.
Try to restart what, with me or? Okay. Oh, maybe that's good. There we go. Yeah. Any job's easy when you know what you're doing. And this is one of those that I really don't have any idea what I'm doing. Thank you, Jesse, for your help. All right, electronics, you win this one. Okay. Matthew chapter 8, where we are going. If you're a country music fan, you may know the name Randy Travis. Pretty big in the 80s and 90s. He had a stroke a few years ago that killed his voice, and he's just now getting it back and starting to tour again. But his breakout album came out in about 1986, I think, called Storms of Life, and this is the chorus to the title cut. It says, "I better change my wandering ways. I know I've seen my better days, always getting high when I get low. I left my soul out in the rain, Lord, what a price I've had to pay. The storms of life are washing me away." You ever felt that way? Things are just seem to be going wrong, and storms are just coming your way. How'd you like to have been in this storm? Notice anything about this ship? There's no front end to it. This was one of the ships that got caught up in what's been known as Admiral Halsey's Typhoon in the South China Sea in World War II, the USS Pittsburgh, and it had a 104-foot section of the front end just ripped off of it. Now, it was about 80-mile-an-hour winds, 100-foot seas, and they figured out that there were some problems with the welding job that was done on that part of the ship. You think? Now, 100-foot wave, I did just a little checking, that's somewhere between about 9 and 15 stories. So let's take the short end of it. You're standing on the 10th floor of a building, and the water's up to your feet. That's a lot. That's a high wave. The ship should have gotten through that without having this happen, but like I said, they found there were problems with it. 80-mile-an-hour wind. That is still rough seas that to get slapped around. I actually had a model of this ship when I was a kid, and there was a kind of joke, trick question, trivia question: what's the longest ship in the world? And the answer was the USS Pittsburgh, because the front end of it was found. It was on Guam. The rest of the ship was in Bremerton, Washington, in dry dock getting repaired. So how many thousands of miles is that from one end to the other? But when we go through storms, you look at what Jesus and the disciples just went through. And there's some lessons for us to learn in this passage. And we talked a little bit about this in class this morning. Just because you're a Christian, remember, you're not going to get smooth sailing all the time. We live in the world just like everybody else. We are subject to the same problems, the same issues that everybody else goes through. If there is a storm, we're not exempt from it. You don't see where a Christian's home is, nice, sunny, mild weather while there's a tornado going on around it. No, we're in the lightning too, just like everybody else is. And the winds going through them. Jesus and the disciples getting on this boat and trying to cross the Sea of Galilee, there is a great relief knowing that Jesus is there. Well, once he wakes up, up until that point, they're pretty scared. But we can have great relief knowing that the Lord is still going to be there. And we can be as calm as Jesus was. And remember, he fell asleep here as we're going through the storm. So I want us to look here at a couple of things. He's asleep, but he's still concerned. You know, when we go through tough storms, many times as we're looking around and we're wondering, well, where's God in all this? Well, in this case, he's right there with him. He's concerned, and we may be going through storms right now. You may be going through a storm right now that nobody else knows about. Well, God knows. God is concerned about it. Remember, Peter said to cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. You know, he's not asleep because he's apathetic. Jesus is still there with them. No matter what storm you're going through, Jesus is still going to care about it. God's still going to care about it. It's up to us, though, to put that burden, whatever it is, on God and let God be able to deal with it. Well, we always have to remember, he may not deal with it the way that we want him to. I'll get to that in a minute here. Now, why is Jesus sleeping? Well, if you look back up in the early parts of Matthew chapter 8, you're going to see he's simply tired. He's had a long day. Look at what he's done before they get on the boat. He's human, remember. He's not just God. He's human and God. It's sometimes a hard concept for us to understand and grasp. And I'll tell you, I'll be the first to admit, I don't understand exactly how it works. But he was complete God, complete man. He was the Godhead was in him bodily, Colossians tells us. So he's just tired. And so he's laid out there taking a nap. And remember, these boats were not the big monstrosities that we see today. It wasn't even like the USS Pittsburgh or like aircraft carrier. These boats were probably about the size of a large school bus. And here they're setting out across the Sea of Galilee, which is really kind of a big lake, really, when you look at it. But we also have to remember, they were led into this, they were following the Lord. They're doing exactly what Jesus tells them to do. And they got into the storm. Now, this should be the death knell for the prosperity gospel and the health. You'll be healthy and wealthy if you're a faithful Christian. Because even obeying what Jesus tells us to do, doing what God says to do, sometimes will lead us into storms. Remember, Jesus also said that the student is not above the master. And if he was hated, we're going to be hated. Here's a little map of the Sea of Galilee. This is about 13 miles from north to south, and I think about 9 miles east to west at its widest point. It's not particularly deep. As you can see, it's kind of like just a large lake. It's got some tributaries here. I think those are flowing into it. Excuse me. It's surrounded by mountains and hills, and storms can come up very quickly on this. Lake Erie, I think, is about the same. It's the shallowest of the Great Lakes, and I've been on it a couple of times on boats, and I'm told that storms will come up on Lake Erie faster than they will on any other of the Great Lakes. And knowing that Jesus they're following what Jesus said to do, and look how fast this storm came up. Think about how fast our life can change. How many of us have been sitting at the house, maybe you're watching a ball game or something, and then the phone rings, and it's bad news on the other end. Someone's died, maybe gotten really sick. Or you've got the green light, but someone coming the other way doesn't stop. And your life changes in a hurry. You know, when my dad was alive, if he called me, and if he began a phone conversation with something like, has anyone from Alabama called you? I knew whatever he was about to tell me was bad news. Someone had died or someone had gotten sick. You get those hints. When I was teaching criminal justice at a community college, village. We were in a small rural community, and I had the coroner come in to lecture about what he does. And he was also a very successful insurance salesman. And he was talking about being a coroner, and basically in a situation like that, he would secure the scene and, if need be, send the body to Colorado Springs for a medical examiner to do autopsies and things, because that was the closest medical examiner. And he said, sometimes I have to notify the family. And he says, if I show up on someone's doorstep at 2 in the morning, they know I'm not there to sell them insurance. They know something's wrong. And so we get these little clues along the way that life is about to change very much, very quickly sometimes. But Jesus, you notice here, is still asleep. They're all of a sudden wrestling with the oars. That's what I imagine they had on these boats instead of sails. They might have had the sails. I don't know a whole lot about them. But they're trying to save their lives in this rocking sea back and forth. And then here's what happens. Mark's account of this says he was in the stern, the back of the ship, asleep. And they're waking him up saying, hey, what are you doing? Don't you care that we're perishing? But notice Jesus had deep trust and faith. I think that's how he was able to sleep. He's at peace with himself. He's at peace with God. He can fall asleep. But the disciples, they're human. And they're struggling on the sea. Probably have done this before, but this is probably one of the worst storms they've ever been in. Interesting point about this. This is the only time in Scripture you see Jesus sleeping. In the middle of a storm. You don't see him any other time, talking with the disciples, and they, look at the time, it's midnight, we need to get some sleep, guys, and we'll finish this discussion in the morning. You don't see that. This is the only time you see it in a storm. What does that tell us about how calm Jesus could be? And how much peace he must have had within himself. How about us? We start watching the weather and getting worried when the clouds start to get dark. But he's right here in the storm, sacked out, peacefully sleeping. A couple of lessons we can see here. When storms come up and we have to go through. Number one, God doesn't need my advice. Doesn't need yours either. How many of us, when something's going on, we're saying, well, God, why didn't this happen? Or why didn't we do this or you do that? Well, God's sitting up there probably saying, look, I don't need your advice. I got this. God is seeing things, and then God doesn't work on my timetable. Anybody have something they really were trying to get accomplished, and they're praying to God, but then it just doesn't work out on the timetable you want? God doesn't need a wake-up call. God is working on his timetable, and a lot of times it's not going to be what I want. And as humans, we have a hard time with that, don't we? How many of us, when we were kids and our parents would try to tell us to wait for something? You're in the toy aisle, you want this particular toy, yeah, your birthday's in 2 weeks. Christmas is coming. And what would we tell them? Oh, come on, can't I just have an early Christmas present? I never get anything. Anybody ever say that? Or your kids said that to you? Why? Our parents are on a different timetable. God is on a different timetable, just like our parents would be, just like we might be with our kids. And that's how faith should be. We should be trusting God to take care of us. Jesus was trusting. Trusting enough he could go to sleep in a storm in a boat that's not much bigger than a school bus on rocky waves. I have no idea how high the waves were, but it was enough for a ship that size or a boat that size. It's going to really slap it around and be out there in the storm like that. And if you've ever been at sea, if we have any Navy or people who've gone on cruises and you've been at sea and been in the rough seas and they've gotten back, you know how scary that can be. And then going from a problem to the prayer and to the power. Look at the panic. Look at verse 25 especially. The panic. Lord, don't you care? You almost look at this as like you're saying, look, we're going down, we're sinking, and you're back here sleeping. Here's a couple of verses you might mark down. I think I've got them in the outline there. No one whose hope is in you will ever be put to shame. That someone who trusts in God, keeping our faith there. God's going to take care of our people, his people. Psalm 59, I will sing of your strength in the morning. I will sing of your love, for you are my fortress, my refuge in times of trouble. Probably why we have such a problem with this is we think of a fortress as something we can see, but this is where real faith comes in, is I can't see God and I can't see what's going on behind the scenes, but God can. God knows what he's doing, and then the disciples came to him and woke him up. Lord, save us, we're perishing. Do you see a difference between what they said and what the psalmist said? Let me back up just a second. Do you see a difference between this and this? Number one. Number two. See a difference? This one, he's showing some faith in God. He's showing some trust. He's showing that he's letting God take care of it. This one, they're scared. They think they're going down. And what you do during the storm can really reveal who you are and what you are. And this is why sometimes when a crisis gets going, well, how am I going to get through? How am I going to deal with this? And this is why many times when at sea or in the air, there were a couple of times, I know my dad had some problems when he was a pilot, and you have to stay completely calm, he told me once. He said, once you get the plane on the ground and you get back into the crew lounge, fine, you can slump down in a chair or you can do whatever, but while you're there, you got to stay focused. And that's what we have to do as humans. But it will show eventually. We can once we get past it. The disciples, took their fears to Jesus. Something we should do. And see, you can see the various pictures, various artists' renditioning of this, how they interpret what was going on here, and their fears taking it all to Jesus finally. Notice they did it after they didn't do it right away. They took a while before they finally decided they would go to Jesus. And these storms can bring us closer to the Lord, or they can push us away. That's really going to be up to us when the storms hit. I'm going to tell you, my record on this has been mixed. Sometimes I get closer, sometimes I don't. And I have found that just when I talk to people about what they go through, many times our records are going to be mixed. There are times when I know people have gotten mad at God. Some of them have just said, well, that's just the way it goes. It's going to differ from person to person. And then note this too, the disciples, when they say, Lord, save us, we're perishing. And there's a couple of ways that actually, if you break this down, when he says, Lord, save us, that is a prayer of, well, it's the shortest prayer you can see. That's the way some have called this. When they say, Lord, save us, we perish, that's part faith and part fear. Save us, Lord. Yeah, that's faith. Yeah, you can do this. Oh, by the way, we're perishing. They're showing their fear, but they're also trying to go to Jesus. Overpowering fear can lead us many times to failure. Just think what would happen if they had just given up on Jesus, even though he's there. What could have happened to them? But they went to him with that fear. Fear is looking to God through our circumstances. Faith is looking at your circumstances through God. In other words, I know God's going to take care of this. This boat is flopping around. I'm holding on for dear life. I don't see land. It's dark. It's stormy. But God's going to get this. Okay, now I'm looking at it through God. I'm trusting God versus fear, where I'm looking simply at the storm. And the two can get mixed and mingled. Many times we've got both. And like in this case, what are they going to do? They have to keep going. They can't turn around. They've got to keep going through this situation. And they had a promise from Jesus that they were going to make it to the other side. When you go back to Mark chapter 4, he said, let's get in the boat and cross over. So he's basically implied, we're going to get over there. But they seem to have forgotten that. They seem to have forgotten what Jesus had done up to this point in his ministry and forgotten the things that he could do. And so they're trying to do this on their own, in their own abilities, just like many times we do today. He didn't promise a storm-free, easy trip. But Jesus did tell them they would get to the other side. So it's just trusting in the promises of God. Jesus did not promise us an easy life as Christians, but he did promise to be with us through this life. He did promise us a reward at the end, but we may have some choppy seas occasionally as we're going across. We just have to remember to put our trust where it belongs and remember that we've got to keep pressing ahead. Keep pressing ahead is what Jesus is wanting his disciples here to see. He is in the boat with them. And remember that the very day earlier, he had cleansed a leper and done he'd cast out some demons. He'd done quite a bit. And all of a sudden they're afraid, worried about a storm, that they're lacking confidence in despite all the things they've seen him do in his ministry up to this point. Now, we've got the complete record. We can look back on this and read about it as history, but do we look at that record and say, okay, God got the disciples, got this person through a bad situation, he's going to do the same thing for me, or do we get scared and try to take things into our own hands? And then look at the power that Jesus has over the storms. Now you can see in this picture here, if you can see, they're huddling down here, and he's up here, I guess, about to give the word to calm the storm. He calmed that storm when he rose and got up, verse 26. And notice it obeyed him right away. And it calmed. Now, he may not calm it that fast for us. It may come a little more gradually. But eventually, storms do calm down. And remember, sometimes he's going to let the storm rage, but he's going to calm us. You ever thought about that? That this might be. Remember what we talked about in the adult class about patience? You ever think that the storm you're going through might be a means of teaching patience? Waiting for it to pass? I know it's no fun while you're in the storm. But waiting for it to pass. It was unbelief in the hearts of the disciples that caused them some problems. They didn't think he could get through this. They didn't think that they've got a sleeping Savior there. They think the ship is sinking. They're not believing. They're not thinking we've got the Lord with us. He can carry us through this. We all face storms of doubt. But have you ever thought about how many of the storms we face in life are of our own making? How many of the problems we get into are usually because of something we did? You know, we got overboard maybe with the credit card a little bit. Well, you know, who made that extra call or that got online to Amazon a few too many times? You know, things like that. We get our health into a bad situation because we didn't eat right or exercise right when we were younger. We maybe made some bad business decisions and it cost us our business. How many of the problems that we get into are self-inflicted? Maybe if you stop and think about it, some of our storms are our own making. And sometimes then that's where we need to look and learn the lessons and look to Scripture and look to the Lord to lead us out of them. And then while other storms are beyond our control or beyond our control to prevent, I can't control anybody else. No, I can control me. But if I'm going through the intersection, I have the green light, there's a car coming the other way, I can't control him. He may go through that light and plow right into me. I can't control if I'm on a flight what happens to that airplane. Think about this too, how much faith is there. I can't see those two people up there on the flight deck to know what they're doing. And sometimes crews have been known to doze off. I was just reading an Air France flight about a month ago, going into de Gaulle Airport in Paris. The pilot and the co-pilot had a big argument on the flight deck while they're on final approach. Final approach is when you hear the landing gear go down, and they make the turn to line up with the runway. That's final approach. You're not very high off the ground when you're on final. And here you got the pilot and the co-pilot up there arguing with each other. They could tell by the cockpit voice recorders. And the air traffic controller, one of the mics was open, and the air traffic controllers could hear it on the ground. But nobody in the back, none of the passengers knew what was going on. And then you're trusting those air traffic controllers to keep those planes from running. Have you ever thought about all the faith you have when you fly? When you're going on the highway. And all those things that are beyond your control, but you're still going anyway. A lot is beyond their control here, but they're scared to death. And they got Jesus right there with them. God has purpose in these storms, in these shipwrecks and tragedies. And keep in mind, they don't all necessarily come from God, but they will be used by God to bless and to strengthen us. We talked today patience. I can't build my patience unless something tries me. I can't build my faith up unless something happens to try it. I can't get if we're younger and I want to be the starting linebacker on the football team, I can't do that unless I get in the weight room and build my muscles up and go through the routine of the exercise routines and the right diet. I can't build my faith up unless I've actually got something to challenge it, right? You understand where I'm going? And so that's where these events coming in can be a strength to us. A lot of it's going to come back to what our attitude is about it. Notice what Paul told the Romans here. when he said, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. Now I want you to look at this. This is one of on the list of scriptures that are misinterpreted, abused, and misused. In fact, I think I've got a series on these in my notes somewhere. Notice he says, we know that all things work together for good. It does not say all things are good. It does not say all things work out. It doesn't say something good comes out of all situations. All things, your good, the bad, the in-between, work together for good for those who love God. To those who are the called according to his purpose. Verse 29, for whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of the Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. That's what's going on with all these things, for us to be conformed to the image of his Son. That's why the good and the bad, it all works together to push us in that direction. And sometime maybe we might do a couple of lessons on that. So what do we do in storms? Well, a couple of things. When we're in trouble, call on the Lord. They finally did. They finally did, after they had been going around on the waves and probably bailing and doing whatever, they finally call on the Lord. Do we call on the Lord first, or do we wait until we get really into the storm? Some of us probably wait a little long until we're into the storm. If you have Jesus in your life, you don't have to worry about perishing. He's greater than any storm, but you're still going to have storms. You're still going to have times when the seas get choppy, when the road gets rough, when the air gets a little bouncy. However you want to look at it, there's still going to be times. Remember, we are subject to the same physical laws that everybody else is. We are subject to the same downturns in the economy that everybody else, or upturns in the economy that everybody else is. If it starts raining today and you got a Christian wheat farmer over here, or a corn farmer, or whatever, and a non-Christian, heathen, really terrible person over here, who's going to get the rain? And the benefits? Aren't both of them going to get it? And then if it's a drought, and the crops won't grow, who's going to suffer? Aren't both of them? But yet maybe God is doing it so that he can somehow use this Christian over here to reach out and have an opportunity to take the gospel to this guy over here. That's possibly why both situations could occur. But Jesus arose, rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was great calm. And I'm sure it was very spooky and eerie to have the sea suddenly go calm. If you've ever gone in rough seas or in rough air and it suddenly gets calm and quiet, it's a very eerie feeling. But Jesus is able to speak to the storms in our lives and bring peace in our lives. You may be going through some storm right now. That's the thing about our personal storms. Many times nobody knows about them except us. It could be in your finances, your job, your health, whatever. But you can go to Jesus, and Jesus can at least maybe calm you if the storm around you isn't calm. All of us face these storms, but we still got a Savior in Jesus. And that's where we can go to him and let Jesus either calm us the storms, or maybe he'll calm both. So what is your need for this morning? To be calmed, or maybe you've got a storm you'd like us to pray with you with. Whatever that may be, let us know. Would you ask together to stand as we sing?